Well, thank you so much to all of you for joining us this morning for this incredibly special geriatric medicine and palliative care grand rounds. It's one of our combined grand rounds in this year's series, and I am completely delighted and honored to welcome and introduce Eugenia Zukerman to our grand rounds who will be speaking today. She is an internationally renowned flutist and writer. If you recognize her and she looks a little familiar, it might be from her time as the arts correspondent on CBS Sunday Morning, which excuse me, she was there for over 25 years conducting interviews with other amazing musicians. She is also the author of 2 books, numerous screenplays, works of nonfiction, articles, and book reviews. She was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and graduated from the Juilliard School of Music, and now lives in New York with her husband, Mr. Richard Novak, who is also joining us. So again, I am just thrilled and humbled that Eugenia accepted our invitation to speak with us today. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and I really hope that all of you get a chance to take a look at her book. Just for the fellows, both palliative and geriatric medicine, I have signed copies of Eugenia's book for each one of you that I purchased as a gift to you guys. So I'll be distributing those. So don't go out and purchase her book. But I highly encourage all of you to take a look. I found her writing just so touching and so authentic and powerful. So I highly encourage you to check it out. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Eugenia.
Thank you. I am Eugenia Zukerman, and I'm delighted to be here. But before I forget, I want to let you know that I do forget. I have Alzheimer's disease. It's a bad diagnosis, but I believe the trick with any bad diagnosis is to stay positive and to live every day with a hopeful outlook. I've written a book about it called Like Falling Through a Cloud. It's a lyrical memoir written mostly in verse, and it's been wonderfully received. And I'd like to share some of the poetry in my book with you. Like falling through a cloud. Sometimes when I wake up, it's dark. Where am I? Sometimes I know, and sometimes I have no idea. So I let the night spirits wrap around me and they whisper to me, don't think, you will remember. I lie very still, and then suddenly, like falling through a cloud, I know I am here. Forgetting. I told you. You asked me that already. Don't you remember? What is wrong with you? How many times do I have to tell you? Why don't you listen? Are you okay? Don't you recall? Are you losing it? I think you're losing it. You need a doctor or something. You need some help. Words. They taunt me, tease me, test me when I fail to find them. I know they're hiding somewhere in the dark realm of my cerebellum, floating around, mocking, sneering, shouting, catch me, remember me, speak me. Sometimes it's wise to wait for one word or the kernel of the word to explode like popcorn and leap onto my tongue, bringing others with it, stringing a sentence together for me to speak. And I say it, all the words in the right order, spilling out of my mouth. And my brain asks me, okay, was that so freaking hard? Marbles. Maybe mine are lost, or maybe they're rolling around in my head looking for a place to land, or maybe not. My daughters tell me to get tested. Tested for what, I ask, even though I know for what, but it's for what I don't want to know. So I let the marbles roll around in a swirl of distracting colors because I don't want to listen to them, the daughters, because if I hear them, I will be very afraid. And this mother cannot be that mother. Not ever. Never. Are there any questions anyone has at the moment?
Comments?
Or comments of what I've read so far?
Continue.
I'm just, I wanted to say something.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of, I haven't read your book yet. I am just blown away by the beauty of the words of something so hard. And I've never heard it expressed that way before. And thank you already. I can't wait to buy your book.
About the guy online in the bookstore.
Yeah, thank you so much. It reminds me of someone at a book signing. A very well-dressed gentleman bought 6 of my books, and he said to me that he
Was giving them to his family.
he was giving them to his family because this family did not know how to deal with him. But by reading the book, they began to understand what I'm going through and what other patients are going through. So I'll continue with a poem called Getting It Together. I've made a date with my banker because I hanker to know where things stand when it comes to what I'll hand to my next of kin. So I should begin to keep track of stuff to see if there is enough to pass around when I'm under the ground. I'm not being dramatic, but I can no longer be static about what lies ahead when I'm dead, which oddly I do not dread. Instead, I want to avoid leaving a mess for the family to assess. I'd like them to say, she left it this way, to keep trouble at bay and to avoid a fray. I don't expect to croak at midnight stroke, but I don't want to be 103, which my mother achieved. I will stick with the plan I've made with my man. When the time seems right, we will have the delight of donning deer suits on the first day of hunting, and we'll go out in the fields and wait to meet our fates. Only, I hope the hunters know how to shoot straight. A super sunny Sunday, almost August, and the tomatoes are bulging on their vines. The flowers continue to burst toward the sky in colors that astound, while on the ground, our once hardy kale has been ripped out by rabbits who attacked at dawn and are gone in a flash, leaving the crop tattered and torn. Nothing lasts forever, not kale or tomatoes or cucumbers or the glorious flowers that fill our fields or the people we adore. And though I know my days are numbered, I feel unencumbered by thoughts of my demise. I do not embrace my inevitable decline, but I'm determined to find a way to make the rest of my stay on this problematic planet filled with light and love and music. As for the deer suit I promised to don, I don't think I'll put it on. Not now, not yet. I'm not ready. I feel steady, and I have a strategy to keep on keeping on, which is simple. Wake up, fetch the flute, summon up syrinx, give thanks for another day, and then play on, play on, play on. My sister, the doctor, Dr. Julie Engelfinger, is in this hall,
On the call.
on this call rather, and she's a pediatric nephrologist out in Mass General and an executive at the New England Journal of Medicine. Julie, I got that wrong, right?
Well, I'm a deputy editor there, but you got New England Journal of Medicine right. No problem.
So here's a poem I read
Look
about
at his food.
So Julie,
Yeah.
big sister, the Harvard doctor, this is a poem I wrote about you. She frequently talks with my daughters and they've shared their concerns. Of course, She frequently talks with my daughters and they've shared their concerns. Of course they have, because that's what family does when one of its members is fumbling and stumbling and bumbling. I'm mad at them and sad at the same time because I know it scares them, given our family history, which I had conveniently forgotten until after my consultation, When I called my big sister, the doctor, who reminded me that 6 of our mother's siblings all developed cognitive impairment quite early in onset and died in their 70s. How in the hell could I have forgotten that?
Sorry, I'm listening.
Because I wanted to, because I must have had premonitions and conveniently offloaded that information.
And maybe when bunnies get older, they
Yeah, I heard.
Now I'm scared, really scared. And I tell my big sister, I don't want to have an evaluation about my devaluation. I don't need an MRI, because why would I want to know about my neuropsychological situation when I can already tell it's all downhill from here? But she says to me, do it. And I know I'm sounding like a jerk. So I stay silent for a beat and then grudgingly finally say, okay. So Julie, any comments?
Well, I think your reaction is very typical. There are things that we don't want to know and need to know. I think saying this to a room that no doubt includes a lot of physicians, there are several kinds of physicians in terms of stuff we want to know about ourselves and don't want to know. There are some of us who maybe went to medical school in part to identify with the aggressor if we see doctors that way. And that way we have special knowledge ourselves and we can look at the jerk in the mirror and say, I don't need to go to the doctor because I know everything. And then there are some of us who don't want to know anything. And so we actually get terrible care because we never go. I'm sort of a hybrid of those, and most of you don't have your faces up there, so you can't raise your hand, but you know who you are. It's hard when we know something is brewing, but we don't quite know what it is, but we sense it's not good. And it takes a good friend or a family member, and I've known Eugenia, Jeannie to me, since she was born. And so she'll listen to me, and I also will listen to her. But it's hard to face the unknown when we hear lurking footsteps that, uh-oh, something's up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is someone talking there? Can't tell. Yeah.
I was wondering if people who aren't speaking could mute.
So I wonder if there are any questions or comments that we should address at this point. Well, I think then I should continue reading some of my poetry from the book. This one is Taking Stock, or So You Know. I am a woman, 72 years old. I have 2 wonderful daughters, a husband I adore, lovely grandchildren. I'm lucky to still have a vibrant career in the arts as a flutist, writer, artistic director of major music series, television journalist, educator, and internet entrepreneur. And despite a little glitch with my memory, this is the happiest time of my life. I won't joke about my Alzheimer's disease, nor will I call it early you know what. I am determined to remain centered and in control and devoted to finding a way, my own way, to be able to say and to mean what I want to convey. And as long as I'm allowed to stay, I pledge to fight with all my might to keep the darkness at bay. Get over yourself. Today there's a morning rehearsal and tonight it's showtime. I remind myself how lucky I am to be able to make music with superb players in front of an audience into whose ears I might send sounds with my flute that can move or delight or enhance or entrance. It's a chance to paint with sound, to stir emotions, including my own, which have grown morbid with useless worries such as imminent demise and an early unseemly death. There's just one thing to do. Stop feeling sorry for myself. play my best. I will banish my darkest fears and toot on. Close call. In my car, check the rear view mirror. Coast is clear. Turn the wheel. Pull away from the curb, nearly clipping a passing car. He blasts his horn at me. Phew, calamity free. Yet the near miss frightens me. Shaken, I drive on. But how could I not have seen that car? What's wrong with me? Am I crossing the line between functional and out of control? As a driver, I failed. I could have ended up jailed, but I didn't, which means I have to stay alert and aware, or I won't be allowed to go anywhere. Dr. Hirano, you had some questions for me.
I did, Eugenia, and I'm so glad that I get a chance to ask them because they were definitely things that, I've been thinking about for a while. As you and Richard know, the first time I heard about you was in that NPR interview with Scott Simon, and I was driving in my car, and I think, just like Falling Through a Cloud is one of my favorite poems, and it just really gripped me right there. And I'm just humbled that you're willing to join us. But one of the questions that I had is I think, Alzheimer's is a disease that is often just characterized by so much loss. And I feel like, we think of it as a disease of loss, losing your memory, losing your identity, for some folks losing, their jobs even. And it can mean a lot of loss, but I feel like, there's you sort of transformed that and turned that around. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to, some of the things that you have gained since your diagnosis.
I think what I've gained is knowledge that I'm very, very lucky to be alive and that I want to stay alive as long as I can. If I can do this in a way that does not devolve terribly, I just want to remain very, very positive. And I think of some of the poems that have really inspired me. There's one in particular, Maya Angelou, which one of my great favorites. And this is her poem. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. I think that's very powerful. It's dark, but as you all know about Maya Angelou, she was such a great personality, and her poetry is just terrific. And I get up in the morning, I practice the flute first. I sort of roll out of bed, do my exercises. Oh, and that's one thing that I always want to take the chance to talk about. And that is, I get out of bed and I roll onto the floor and I do my exercises. And I think without that, I would not be able to function. I also am exercising all the time, walking, hiking, doing as much as I can, because I know that it's terribly important, and really keeps me going, and it gives me a confidence that I have. The exercise is so important, and it may be wrong of me to say this, but I think even if you really are not in shape to move, you can make yourself in shape to move. And I think it's just so important. And I feel that, the trick is to live every day and to have confidence and to be just so grateful to be alive. And I am very lucky. I am living in upstate New York, and COVID is out here everywhere. And I think, for all of us at this time, we really must stay positive because the opposite is not acceptable. And I am writing a poem every day, every single day. And it just happens. And I like doing it, and it helps me. It gives me a center. And I have oh, sorry. I think you had something to say. No?
Is there another question?
Is there another question? Anyone have another question?
I see David.
Yes, thank you so much. I hear that from the professional caregiver side, there may be many negative messages coming from us to people who are on this journey. And I'm wondering how you would advise us to change what we're saying and how we are working with you and people in situations like yours to redirect our message in a more helpful way.
That's a simply terrific question. And I have so much faith in doctors, and I think I rely on knowing that I can certainly turn to my sister and I can turn to other people. But I think there are some doctors who are just better at making their patient feel comfortable. And there are others who are busy and just not able to give the kind of care that they can give. But I feel so lucky that I have a sister who I can call up and annoy and say, are you sure? Is it okay? But I think it's, to your question, what can you do? I think be kind, be an alert listener. Because I think when I look back to having gone to a lot of doctors, I didn't feel comfortable feeling that I had asked for the right questions. And, I think probably everyone has had the experience of going to a doctor, knowing that the doctor wants to go get lunch and get out of there. But generally, I find that that doctors are so careful and helpful and want to make the patient feel better and confident. And I feel very lucky that I have that here up in the, where are we?
Hudson Valley.
Hudson Valley. And we get plenty of chance to walk and hike and play with the dogs, etc. I think it's, at the time we are in now, it's so difficult for doctors because there's so many people are in need, and it's I don't know if there are enough doctors to go around at this point. And but I think that negativity coming from a doctor, I have not experienced that. But I have friends who have said, the doctor has made me feel like I'm going to die and I feel terrible. I haven't experienced much of that. And certainly I have experienced the opposite with my sister, the doctor, Julie Engelfinger. She's just terrific. And I've been with her from the time she started out as a pediatric doctor, and I went on rounds with her, and I have been in awe of her ever since. I've been lucky enough to go with her sometimes on rounds, etc. And it's really special. I don't know if that helps.
This is Jeannie's sister. I wondered if I could say something, because as a family member, I do have some suggestions for people, and they aren't based on Eugenia's experience, but our mother at the last few years of her life had cognitive decline, and I went with her to a bunch of appointments because she lived in Boston and I was the Bostonian child. I think that early in the process of cognitive decline, what would be very helpful to patients and families is to emphasize making decisions and plans and arranging things so that you can, as the patient, still participate and plan things. Eugenia's done that rather naturally, but a lot of people do not. And the other thing would be to turn patients to groups and resources that emphasize doing positive things while they still can do them, not emphasizing the heaviness of the diagnosis, because all of us are visitors on the planet anyway, and there are some things about Alzheimer's and related disease that are in some ways easier than having, say, inoperable cancer of the pancreas or colon cancer or many other conditions. So that putting people and their families in touch with resources in a really positive way, which I observed, at least with my mom, didn't always happen, could be very helpful. And I know that there's a push to do that, but I think that goes a very long way for families. Thanks.
I agree with you totally. And one of the things that I have observed very happily is the Alzheimer's Association. I was in touch with them from the very beginning of being assessed. And I have been working with them, and I have been what would you say? A champion for the Alzheimer's Association. And I think that it's very important that that organization and others like it can really reach out to people and make them understand you don't have to, do it alone, that you're not going to do it alone. And that is very helpful. I'm so blessed that I have you, Julie, but there are a lot of people who are just, left by the wayside, and that's a shame. But there's only a certain amount of time that can be done. And I feel like reading a poem.
Yep.
Does anyone mind? The ephemeral euphoria of applause, relief, and a sense of accomplishment, especially given the strange state I'm in. And I don't mean Washington, D.C. Backstage after the performance, kudos and kind words go a long way because I'm no longer plumped with confidence. And although it wasn't my best ever, it also wasn't my worst yet. I had a glitch or two, but perfection isn't the goal. Now that I'm over my peak, but under my expiration date, now I hope to walk off the stage knowing I can float an elegant phrase and spin a tender melody. And tonight, despite avid applause, truth is, I'm not sure I did. Determination. After my session, my takeaway is this lesson. I've got to get me some grit. I hereby resolve to evolve to a stronger state of mind and purpose. Enough whining and worrying and wondering about losing my mind and ending up wandering around town, blabbering to myself barefoot in a ball gown, with my hand out for someone's kind quarter. The next step is to step up and find ways to bolster my mind and give me the guts to stop thinking the red light is blinking. I may be in decline, but I'm not dying on the vine. Not yet, I say. Not until they take me away. Interlude. 6th grade. Members of the local orchestra come to my school to demonstrate their instruments. I hear the flute and I am enchanted, bewitched, mesmerized, and I run home and tell my parents, I have to learn to play the flute. Please, can I? And in those days, long ago, at public schools in America, there were instruments kids could borrow, and there were music teachers who loved to teach how to play them. And at the age of 10, I started to take lessons, and it made me happy and hopeful. And blowing across the mouthpiece to produce sounds was miraculous and delightful. and difficult, but I wanted to do it. I did it. I played and played and played. Okay, some days I hated it because it was hard, but I had to practice because that was part of the deal with my parents, who were very musical themselves, and they encouraged me and helped me. And the first time I ever played on a stage was with my dad at my school. And it was pretty thrilling. And I remember it was a piece by Gabriel Fauré, who was dead and very famous. And I was scared, but I did it and I didn't mess up. And that felt so good. So I just went on taking lessons and trying to play better. And the flute started to feel like a friend. And when I would get home from school, I was never lonely because I could go to my room and play with my close friend, which might sound strange, but that was how it was. And it became more than a friendship. It became a love, a deep and constant love. And that's the way it still is. Okay, most of the time, but not always, because getting old makes playing it harder. So when I go onto a stage now, I worry about messing up, and especially now that I might be losing my cognitive function, what I'm hoping is that my brain will remember where my fingers go and that I will be able to take a deep breath and exhale and send sweet sounds into the air, because if I can't do that anymore, who will I be? Let me read this. Doctors are saying that there's a special connection between music and the brain, one that bypasses the neocortex and impacts the brain in a therapeutic way. When the brain is stimulated by music, its neurons begin to fire in perfect synchrony. Music is a second language and stored in a special part of the brain in a novel area, protecting you from dementia and enlarging your capacity for emotional expression, says Dr. Ralph Wharton, professor at Columbia Medical Center in New York. Quote, the brain evolved to reach out into the world. The ear works as a transducer. The cochlea inside our ears transforms patterns of sound energy that the brain can use internally. Imagine that. What a miracle. What a fantastic gift. Dr. Hirano, I wonder if you have another question for me.
I actually have a question from the audience. Deborah Jarvis has been waiting patiently to ask you a question, so I'm going to let her ask her question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay, Eugenia?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, thank you for sharing so much of yourself with us. I'm a chaplain here at the University of Washington Medical Center, and my question to you is, how have your spiritual beliefs affected your experience of Alzheimer's, and how has your experience affected your spiritual beliefs?
Very interesting question. I think after I went and was evaluated at the hospital for the very first time, I went with my younger daughter, and I was, what do I say? I'm just trying. Yeah, I got on the, well, after I was diagnosed, and another a funny thing happened, and that is that I was probably, and probably am, the only person who really loved taking an MRI. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed it. I just was, it's like outer space, and I really didn't want to get out. They thought I was so peculiar, but I am. So, but anyhow, yeah, I did. What was I supposed to?
Spiritually?
Yes, spiritually. My spirituality has been different in different eras of my life, and I find music is my spiritual other. And my flute is my spiritual other. And I get so much from those things that I feel that I am very lucky. I have gone to Sabbath school, and the thing I liked the most was the rabbi, who was a very warm and caring person. And so I always felt very comfortable in that setting. But after I went off to college, I did not stay being a person who wanted to go to Sabbath school or to follow that. I don't know why, but I really am inspired by people who are, you know, I have a great sense of wonder. That's what I have. I don't know if that's a spirituality, but I don't know where the poetry came from. I really don't. Although I know that my father told me that I used to walk behind him telling stories and never shutting up. So it was something that I think from an early age I needed to express myself. And I am now 76 and I feel good. I'm always amazed when I look in the mirror and I say, "Who is that?" But I feel so fortunate to be at this age, to be healthy, to have family, to have grandchildren, to have this fantastic husband, and to be able to make music. And I think in the United States before COVID, there was a very active way in which schools taught music, and I think that it should always be continued because it's very, very helpful. Welcome. So, Dr. Hirano, I think you had another question for me.
I did, Eugenia, and I think you partially answered this, but one of the questions I did have for you after hearing your amazing poetry was were you a poet before your diagnosis? Were you writing poems before your diagnosis, or was that something that you started doing after your diagnosis?
I was always writing poetry, but I also had published 6 books, and I have tried all kinds of expressions through my writing.
Talk about this.
Yeah, I wrote a book with my sister Julie, and it's called Coping with Prednisone, and it may work miracles. How do you handle this? But how do you handle the side effects and other cortisone-related medicines?
It's still out there.
And it's still out there. And Julie, you can speak to how important that book has been, because it just has been.
Well, I would say that book doesn't have much poetry, but as it turned out, it filled a need. And part of what I think Eugenia does, and part of a sort of mantra in our family has, and one that I think is a good lesson for young people, is go where there's a need. And at the time, Jeannie and I collaborated on that book. She had a medical problem, totally different from this. It was a pneumonitis, eosinophilic pneumonitis, and she had to be on prednisone. And she said, "I don't want to be on prednisone, I'd rather die." I said, "So you will die if you aren't." She said, "Oh." And she said, "Send me a book on the side effects then, because I have a friend who had terrible side effects." That was the late cellist Jacqueline Dupre. And I said, "Well, I have a handout I give my patients. There's no book for patients on this." And so I sent her my 5 or so page handout that I gave to parents of children with kidney problems that needed to be treated with glucocorticoids. And she called up and she said, "Julie, this will never do. This is paltry. This is not helpful." And I said, "So, there's nothing out there. Why don't we write a book?" And you said, "I'm a flutist. I'm going to have to say I have a lung disease. You've got to be joking. I'm not going to be going public with that." And I said, "So I'm a pointy-headed academic, and this is going to be a book for lay people, and this will not float well at Harvard Medical School." And then we both kind of laughed and said, let's get over ourselves and do it. And so I think that a lot of things that people accomplish don't start with the idea that we're going to accomplish something, but more we've got something to give that isn't out there. And I think that what Eugenia has done with going public, if you will, about her Alzheimer's diagnosis is, while there are different ways that some people have publicly said what the issue is with them, and given that, in fact, people are not saying much still about having cognitive decline or Alzheimer's disease. There's a lot of fear about being stigmatized, and there's a fear, you know, my friends are going to run from me. I won't get more jobs. I might be fired. I better keep this quiet. And I think an analogous thing that we all know about is that at the time Jeannie and I were kids, the diagnosis of breast cancer was very secret. Nobody talked about it. I think First You Cry was the first sort of book about it, and it opened up a floodgate. So that I think patients can really contribute, and that would be, as one professional in a very different field to all of you, is I think encouraging patients to do what they can be a really positive, even pathfinding event.
That's,
If I may, can I ask a question?
of course.
I'm hearing some I'll try to push through and make it brief. Question for you, Eugenia, and also Julie and Richard. For those of us who give dementia diagnoses to folks and teach that skill, would love to hear you reflect on sort of that experience for you, hearing the diagnosis. And I think a lot of what we've already talked about this morning really focuses around some of that strength based focus and that preparation for the future. But the tips on and the reflection of the diagnosis for you and your family of dementia.
Well, I was very shocked. I guess I knew I was getting a little bit, confused, but my daughters kept saying, Mom, you've got to be tested. And I took it very lightly. I said, really? Come on, there's nothing to do. So my younger daughter took me to the hospital, and that was when I was diagnosed for the first time. And I still couldn't quite get a grasp on it. My daughter and I went on the subway back into Manhattan, and I went to my apartment. I went up to my desk, and for whatever reason, I stared at the wall. I don't know how long I stared at the wall, but for some reason, I opened the drawer, I took out a pen, and I started to write. And I had no idea what was going to come out. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. So after I had about 25 pages, I showed what I had written to my younger daughter, who's a wonderful writer herself. And I said, is this anything? And she said, is this anything? This is important. This is really good. Just keep writing. So I'm very grateful to her for her help. And I think it helped me enormously, but I have no idea where that came from. And I have no idea why I wrote in poetry. I have written a lot of poetry, but whatever it was, it just flowed through me. And I didn't really plan to publish it. I just was, people started reading it and said, whoa, this is something. So I feel very blessed that I was noticed and that I was able to, read my work. And I think, again, it makes me remember people who've come to talk to me and say, it really helped me to hear what you have to say, because I think there's there's a weird shamefulness that we Americans have when we're not perfect. And I think that we do aspire to be our very best, but particularly if you're in the arts, you have to be your very best. But I feel very fortunate that I just kept writing.
Thank you, Eugenia. I think one of my colleagues, Dr. May Reed, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, that would be great. Otherwise, I can paraphrase and try to do justice.
Obviously this highlight, words matter. And I've had patients who came to me from other doctors because they were just very uncomfortable with the communication style of using words that they felt could be better phrased. So I have a patient who she's a PhD in psychologist, and she really wants me to use cognitive impairment. She doesn't want me to use Alzheimer's disease, the word dementia just really bothers her. And I was just wondering about your perceptions and your experience with that.
For me, it didn't bother me. I didn't take it quite seriously. I was, the moment that I was given the diagnosis, I knew this was going to be time consuming. That was what was bothering me. But I also felt that, talking to my sister, talking to other people, that it was important for me to understand that I had to be able to make my point, etc. I know that there are three stages, 3 stages of Alzheimer's. And the first is the longest, which has 3 parts. And I still keep saying I'm just in the, in the first still, but I know it's happening. And I think it's very important to make people understand that it's not your fault. I try very hard to get the right word at the right time, but I don't always do that. And I think it's really important that doctors are, like my sister, will always stop and talk. And she has a bunch of kids, and my kids and my grandkids, and she I don't know how you do it, Julie, but every day there's someone in the family saying help, and they go to Julie. So I think Julie is a wonderful doctor in that way and every way.
So could I say something about this question and family members and looking at the long haul for someone who has been given the diagnosis of Alzheimer's or cognitive impairment? One thing that hasn't come up in this session is therapy. Therapy has, in terms of drug therapy or brain stimulation therapy, or using stuff such as engineered cells, all of this brings up different categories of treatment for either prevention or slowing the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And much of it has been disappointing, and studies that I look at, because of course I'm interested in this topic, and as I said, I'm a pointy-headed academic, so I see papers all the time. People get excited when there are small changes, and all of us who treat patients, I don't treat patients with this condition, try to think who should get what therapy, and how do you bring up being assessed, participating in a randomized trial, or an open one-arm trial where it's a phase 1 or 2 study. So this is a question to all of you to think about, because obviously we'll run out of time. What's a good way to approach your patients about this. There's a field we all know very well because it's a common general problem, and that is oncology. The field of oncology has put almost all their patients into a trial. That is not true for Alzheimer's disease. So I'm asking you a question that is unanswerable, but some of you might like to say, what do you tell your patients? How can that move the field forward and change the trajectory in the future?
That's, go ahead. Someone was.
I think there's a little feedback, Eugenia, but you're good to go.
Do you want to read a final poem?
My husband is suggesting a final poem. And I'm always doing what he says, sometimes. Okay. After falling through the cloud, I am now living with Alzheimer's disease. It is inside me. It inhabits me. I did not choose it. I do not want it. I have lived with it for 3 years, more than that now. But I defy it. It cannot break me. Try as it might, I will not be defined by my diagnosis. I will live every day at a time. I will keep on keeping on. It is not the end for me, not while I can still play the flute, not while I can see the flowers and run with the dogs and love and be loved. Life is a sacred gift to be treasured, and I do treasure it with all my heart and soul.
Thank you so much, Eugenia, Julie, and Richard. I think this has been just a really refreshing, incredible morning for us, and something very different, I think, than what we're used to hearing in Grand Rounds. So I really appreciate the time that you have taken and being able to answer so many of our questions. And giving us a perspective that's very different and very valuable and important, I think, for all of us to hear. But I think it just takes incredible courage and talent to take, these feelings and this experience that seems so intangible, and then to so eloquently put it into words has just been, really amazing to hear. And I think it just speaks to so much to what can be gained despite getting a diagnosis that, again, is characterized by loss. And I really think it counters that narrative of loss. So again, just gratitude, deep gratitude for all of you being here and sharing with us.
And one more comment. This is May. This is in comment to Dr. Engelfinger's query. I was hoping Angela Hansen was here, but we do have a very robust interactions with our ADRC and our memory brain wellness clinic. And I personally do endorse that my patients get involved and talk to people coordinating and examining clinical trials so that they have an idea of what all their options are if they're interested. So it is a very important point.
Thank you.
So how about one last poem? What about it? Something upbeat.
Here.
My choice. I have abandoned self-pity. It makes me feel shitty. I'd rather laugh myself to sleep than stay awake agonizing over why me. And whichever deity tries to tag me for a chump will find himself with a lump on the cocoa when he tries to interfere with what I'm trying to do here, which is simply to stay strong in body and mind. Even though my mind and body are compromised, nonetheless, I wish more than ever to share whatever I can about trying every day to feel well and to dwell on the beauty and gift of being alive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eugenia. Thank you for setting us off with that last poem. That was a gift.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Be well, be happy.
Thank you so